Hey everybody, it's Robert coming to you with another adventure into history, and today we're going to be cleaning this grave up right here. I have some D2 with me that is the only thing that I ever use to clean graves with. It's been tested safe, does no harm to the stone, so that's what I'm going to be using today. But while I do that, I'm going to get Dan to tell you whose grave this is that we're cleaning up today.
Well, I know everybody thinks that I'm kin to everyone under the sun, but this is actually I am a direct descendant of this lady. This is my great-great-grandmother. Her name was Mowina Briley Magouirk, and she was the daughter of Nehemiah and Nancy Garris Magouirk. Excuse me, Nehemiah and Nancy Garris Briley. She married John Walker Magouirk, and John Walker died in the Confederate Army somewhere in Kinston, North Carolina in 1863, I believe. And she remarried a man named George Ridley after the Civil War. George Ridley came home from the war and he married her. And he raised my great-grandfather, who was a baby at the time that John Walker Magouirk went off to war. So this headstone had fallen over years ago and broke in several pieces, and I repaired it probably in the late 1980s, early 1990s. But back then, the only thing you could repair something like this was PC7 epoxy. And I glued this thing back together, and so far so good. It's still holding together. We're right outside of Manchester, Georgia, just north of Manchester in Meriwether County, and this is Bethesda Methodist Church Cemetery. And
it's a beautiful, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but this is a beautiful cemetery that Dan has brought us to today. If you look out through here, there's lots of what we'd consider like early settlement style box tomb, fieldstone box tombs. This is one that I told Dan earlier before we started recording that we could probably just spend a whole day out here. Of course, Dan knows a lot of history about the people here, but it is an amazing old cemetery.
Yeah, this cemetery is very well kept, and I'd like to thank Mr. John Lanier. It's through his efforts that it is kept as well as it is. The church here used to be a Methodist church, and it closed up sadly, but the church is now used for some other kind of church that's in there now. I don't really know what it is, but the cemetery was given to a little committee by the Methodist conference, and it's maintained by really one person. And Mr. John, I think he's been looking for someone to take over so that if something happens to him someday, it'll be maintained. But this is where some of our family is buried all around her, unmarked graves, old graves. There's a cousin buried there. There's Maddie Briley Cox. And of course, this was my mother's side of the family. My mother's mother was Ethel Magouirk Hudson, and this is her father's mother.
And we've seen your son, Briley, on some videos.
That's right.
So that's where his name comes from.
My son, Briley, this is where his name comes from this side of the family. And I had this inscribed on the back of here years ago. Mowina Magouirk Ridley, daughter of Nehemiah and Nancy Garris Briley. Just for future reference. But I went to Kinston, North Carolina, where we believe that her husband, my great-great-grandfather Magouirk, was buried, because he died there according to his war records. And they have a nice battlefield park and memorials there and everything, but I went around trying to find where his grave might be, or where all the Confederate soldiers or the casualties of the battle were buried. And I was directed to a historian. He had a little store there, and he pointed across the road and he said, "You see that Dollar General?" He said, "You see that parking lot next to it?" And he said, kind of out in that area right out there is where all of the Confederate casualties were. And he said that, no markers were ever placed on it, but they had tried what they could do to save it and were kind of unsuccessful. But I did get a headstone, and I hope to place it out here in memory of him. I've got a VA marker to put on the other side of her. She has aunts and uncles buried here that died long before the Civil War. You can see several places, several graves right there that are unmarked. And in that one, supposedly is an uncle named Sam, Uncle Sam Briley. They say is buried in that one. He was a member of the Home Guard, so I ought to be able to get him a
Oh yeah,
VA marker as well.
absolutely. Did you show this one that has the
Yeah.
hand engraved in the concrete?
That's just scratched in the concrete. Her name was Maddie Briley Cox, and she was a cousin to Mowina. I think she was one of Uncle George Briley's daughters, I think. Then there's some other relatives buried down there, Briley Smith and his family. But all of our family went to, well, all of this family went to Texas, settled in Rusk County, and she and her husband, George Briley, did not like it one bit. And they said they were going back to Georgia if they had to live on bread and water. Wow. So they came back here, and I think they left here in the 1870s and went to Texas, along with her parents, who are buried out there, and all of her brothers and sisters except for one, John Henry Briley. He came back and went to Meansville, Georgia, in Pike County. That's where he's buried. But anyway, they wound up back here. She was born in 1839 and died in 1881. But we have an old family Bible that says her date of death was actually 1882. So I don't know which is correct. Right. There's no other records, no newspaper articles or anything about her. So
I'm gonna go grab some water.
Okay. But we do have a photograph of her that hangs on the wall in my hallway at home. A photograph of her holding John David Magouirk, and the photo was actually made around 1861 or 61 or 62. Again, I'm out here in the field, so I don't have my notes with me, and believe it or not, I actually can't remember everything. That D2 is really working wonders already. You can see the many, many unmarked graves here. People who could not afford markers. More people who could not afford markers, just a head and foot stone made of field stones. Now there's a name scratched on a piece of concrete that says Crane, C-R-A-N-E.
So now it's the moment of truth. We'll see how it looks with this.
Wow.
Oh wow, yeah.
Blue and white marble. That is great, Robert.
Yeah, it looks really good. Another.
We didn't intend to clean this when we came out here. I just wanted to stop and show you the grave.
Yeah.
We wound up doing this.
I remembered I had D2 in the back of the truck, and
yeah. Well, that
you
is
told me
good.
the story of putting it back together, so I figured, why not? And I know, as you've heard me say before on video, you already know this, but this D2 will continue to eat on all this biological growth or whatever you want to call it that's on this stone, and we can come back here in a couple weeks, a month, or whatever, and it'll look even better than it does today, especially for all the stuff on the top that's right there. But it's already looking a whole lot better, that's for sure.
After she married George Ridley, she had several more children. She had children named George Ridley, Nehemiah Ridley, William Philip Ridley, and a daughter named Nancy who married a Wood. And my grandmother was close to all those people when she was growing up. And I had a cousin, I think he was grandson of William Philip Ridley. A cousin named Bill Ridley who came down and used to visit with us, but Bill passed away several years ago. Look at that green in that marble.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And here we go again here. All right, now I'll just leave it and
Okay,
let nature and the D2 do its thing.
well, that's great.
It looks a whole lot better though, don't
It
it?
sure does. Unbelievable. That's great.
It'll be the best looking one out here soon. I need to do an update on the bird headstones that we cleaned, because when you drive by the Waverly Hall Cemetery, they just
They
stand,
stand
out.
out.
They just stand
I
out.
really do.
Looks a whole lot better, that's for sure. Still got a bunch of stuff on it though. D2 will continue to eat away at all this stuff,
Yeah.
and it'll clean up the rest of the way. So it has been about a month since we've initially came to the Bethesda Cemetery here and used D2 to clean this stone. So we're back to check on it. I think it looks real good.
Looks much better.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Much, much better. I'll have to get some more and spray on it in a little. Just,
Yeah, it looks like the only parts that really didn't
yeah.
are there, but it might still keep going. Keeps raining on it.
Yeah.
It looks good though.
It sure does.